here at Cranfield. So what we will do is we will hear from both of them. So after I finish this introduction, first of all, we will hear from now Dr Michael McGrath, who finished his DBA back in 2004. So he will hopefully at some point be able to tell us a little bit about life after the DBA. And then from Nneka Abulokwe, who is a more recent graduate, and she actually graduated just a few weeks ago on the 6th of June this year. And she will also tell you about her DBA story. And then we will pass back to me, and I will give you a very brief overview of our International Executive Doctorate program, and then we will open it out to any questions and answers that you've got, and I may even have a few of my own. As Rebecca said, if you think of any questions as we're going through, please do type them into the box at the bottom. Send them either to Rebecca or myself or all of us, and then we can ask the questions when we get to the Q&A at the end. So similarly, if you do re-experience any of the technical problems, do also let us know so that we can sort those out as soon as possible, but I think we should be fine now until the end of our session. So with no further ado, I will pass over to Michael, who is going to tell us his story first of all.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Michael McGrath here. Let me start by saying thank you very much to the School of Management of the University for having me here. Thank you very much to Emma and to Rebecca for fabulous hard work in making this all happen. Right, so the theme of this is transformation, and I think it's very, very good that we've got a freshly minted DBA and a seasoned DBA. I suppose I should start with giving everybody a bit of a warning. And the warning is this, that there's material which you may find scary in this presentation, which has never been put into the public domain before. So you have been warned. So let me start at the beginning. It all started, life was very, very, very good. Life was fantastic. Let me give you an insight into my life. My life was filled with parties, non-stop. I was a hard worker. This is me on my first day to school. You'll notice lovely blonde hair. That's all gone now, sadly. And I had an adventurous lifestyle. I can still tell you that the bruises are still there on the knees. Nothing has changed. And I still climb trees. I was a sharp dresser. I hung out with fabulous, stylish women. And I traveled in fast cars and motorbikes. And then this happened. I did my MBA. And when I did my MBA, somebody made a huge mistake. And they gave me a gold medal for research. And this was disastrous because this made me think I knew all there was to know about research. So I set out to find which university would give me the best research experience. And I found it. It was Cranfield. However, I also found out that what I knew about research was very, very little. So I can safely say that the DBA experience started with me having to very much reassess what I was going to do and what it was all about. And I think that's a very, very common experience for participants in the DBA program. Quite simply, my experience was that the very first year was as much about learning how to learn as it was doing your research topic. And it was a bit like a legal high. I spent a lot of time expanding my knowledge, expanding my expertise, looking at new problems in new ways. I'd never looked at them before. As I was saying, that in itself was a real eye-opener. And then, of course, the following 2 years were spent doing sort of original research and trying to present that into what looked like 3 coherent and well-structured pieces of work. My panel were very supportive. They all acted as if it was a coherent piece of work. It wasn't. But anyway, and then we had to pull that together to produce the final thesis. So it was hard work. I'm getting all the bad news out first. So what did I actually study? Well, what I study in an essence is all around decision making, and in particular how we make decisions when we get outside of our familiar problem domain, which basically is a very, very clever way of saying how do you decide to do something when you're not familiar with what's going on around you. And we often face these sort of situations in life. Now, I looked at some of the very, very top decision makers that there were, and I found that there was a group of top American decision makers made up of the very, very best people in politics, the best people in the army, the best people in the intelligence services, and they embarked on the Bay of Pigs. And If you know your history, you'll know that that wasn't exactly a stellar moment in foreign policy, military, or project management. But the self-same people, less than 2 years later, found themselves dealing with the exact same set of people on the other side of the table with the Cuban Missile Crisis. And yet, these people, once again, this time they played it flawlessly. They took a complete mess and turned it into a success, where they had started off with a relatively calm situation and turned it into a mess in the first place. And I really wanted to understand, how is this possible? What was the differentiator? And the context that I was looking at was in the world of banking, because that's what I work in, banking M&A, and I wanted to understand what happens when we're presented with unfamiliar problems. So that was really the question I was trying to study. Now, I wrote 80 pages on that question, but that is the question in short. So what did I find? Well, the very first thing I found was that despite what we say, and despite what we probably honestly believe about ourselves, we're extremely biased. We are biased. It's just in our nature. It isn't good, but it is in our nature. We're biased in all sorts of ways. So, for example, you might be somebody who doesn't like to work with old people. You might be somebody who only works with older people. You mightn't want to work with men. You might want to work with women. You may not want to work with women. You may want to work with men. We have all sorts of biases, and we have all sorts of subtle biases too. You may not feel good about somebody who's got clammy hands. You may not feel good about somebody who has an Irish accent. You may not feel good about the person you meet after that bad meeting you had just now. You may not like the way somebody walks. It just goes on and on and on. So I think accepting that we have biases and that those biases affect our decision-making was actually a key part of the whole process, and the whole process of uncovering and trying to make sense of what I was seeing around me. The next thing I discovered, I discovered for myself, I wasn't the first to discover this, was that we've got all these wonderful models for explaining our decision-making processes. And I've kept a diary of these since I started the DBA. I'm now up to 89 different things that explain how and why we make decisions. And I've come to a simple conclusion, that none of them are correct, but that they all help. And so for me, it was quite a mind-altering moment, to be honest with you, whereby I had to understand that I can have 20 models that explain what's going on around me, and they all make sense, they all seem appropriate, but despite all of that, they actually on their own don't explain things. And the great example of this was given to me by Mary Jo Hatch, who made me write an essay once on strategic policy formulation in my company, and she gave me 20 theories, and I proved every theory applied. And that doesn't make sense. And I'll come back to that in a moment. The next thing is, I found how we were just not rational. And I managed to take the world's largest financial transaction at the time, and I was able to prove empirically that actually all the risks that were most likely to come and hit the organization were not managed well, and all the risks that were not major were managed fantastically and had processes and controls and everything around them. So I could show we were irrational in our behavior. We're also very susceptible to groupthink. It could be herd mentality, whatever. The Bay of Pigs is a famous book based on that by an author called Janus, and his work, is just exemplary in the field. But actually, we are just extremely prone to going with the herd, particularly when you get homogeneous groups. And homogeneous groups don't all have to be, same gender, same background. They can actually just be a bunch of people who work together for a long time or whatever. And so what do you do about this? Well, what you need out of this is very, very clear communications and controls. And you need to ensure that your people are aware and are able to innovate. So a very, very simple example of this it was a tragic accident that happened in the 60s in California, which was a group of firefighters, and the wind changed direction, and the fire came up the mountain behind them. And every one of them died apart from one, because the one who didn't die lit a fire in front of himself, and when that fire blew up, he jumped into the middle of it, and therefore there was nothing left to be burned. But he was able to innovate in the spur of the moment in a way that his colleagues weren't, and he therefore survived. So did it transform me? Absolutely. I've listed some of the areas where I just feel my life today and my life 10 or 14 years ago was different. Firstly, my view of the world is very, very different. My view of the world now is basically an interconnected mesh. The idea of the internet suits me down to the ground, to be honest with you, because I see the world as being millions of complicated little components called people, and they're all interconnected in all sorts of ways, and you're never going to fully understand it. But what you can do is try and get yourself the right set of working models that explain it. The next thing is the world is not as you think it is. So every one of us experiences the world our way, but And that's our personal reality, but the reality for everyone else around us may be very, very different. That therefore makes me very contrarian. And you find that you actually end up often having a different view. Not to be contrary, but actually I think it's really, really important to be able to put yourself into different perspectives to try and understand what's going on. And you can see this very, very effectively when you're in a meeting. Because if you start looking at the participants in the meeting, you start saying, well, actually, what is that person thinking? Why is she saying that? What's her motivation? But not everyone can do that. And one of the great things about the DBA, at least for me, was that the DBA gave me the ability to look at things from lots of different perspectives and appreciate those different views. Big data, you know, I learned a lot about dealing with large amounts of data, which has fared me very, very well. The next thing is the constant search for the root cause. I find, having been through the DBA experience, I'm not really interested in the superficial. That's great, and it's fine for day-to-day things, but actually, when you're dealing with real problems, you need to get right to the very, very root of those problems. And therefore, I don't stop asking. I'm like a 3-year-old. Why? Why? We have to cut costs. Why? Is it that we're spending too much or we're just not selling enough? It also gives me a certain confidence. I think if you go through this experience, and I'll be honest, it's a difficult, long-term commitment. If it wasn't difficult, everybody would have a DBA. There's a reason for that, right? But if you come through that, then you know you can deal with pretty much anything. You know, because you're dealing with extremely difficult, complex ideas. You're dealing with data. You're collecting. You're structuring yourself. You're managing yourself. There's no one really on your back to make you do things on time. It's up to you. So when you come through that, you're actually quite confident in yourself. The next thing is credibility. Having a doctorate is fantastic for getting restaurant bookings. I can get into the Ivy now whenever I want. But actually, it also works in the business world as well. So, you know, it actually does give you a certain credibility. Now, there's a downside. People may say, oh, he's too academic. But actually, once you've shown that you can think through on complex problems, that's actually a really valuable skill. And certainly senior management, if not middle management, really appreciate that. The next thing is, if you see the world as interconnected and all the things I said already, then actually you've got the ability to think very, very big and see things closer to as they are. Since I've already said you can't see the world as it truly is. But it does allow you to take a bigger view of the world, allow you to take a wider view of the world. And therefore you tend to get less caught up in the flow. You tend to be less involved in the actual here and now, the zeitgeist, and instead actually take a view of what does this actually mean, what's actually happening around us, what's the root cause, what's the real problem. And what you get to is a view, that's where I got to, and it's very interesting. I was told this at the start of my career, and I didn't really believe it. But actually, business is incredibly simple. There's just lots of little simple things to manage. So the difficulty of business is the number of little things to manage. Each of those things, if you understand them, is very, very simple. And then finally, which I have always believed from the start, is that it's all about people. You know, it doesn't really matter how good our technology is, how good our systems are. It will always, always come down to people. And that really is my transformational experience. So I think with that, I shall pass it back to you, Emma, and hope I do this properly.
Thank you, Michael.
There you go.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Michael, for that entertaining as well as insightful presentation. We'll come back to Michael in just a little while to ask him some questions. But first of all, I'm going to pass over to our second DBA alum that's here today, Nneka, and ask her to tell us a little bit about her story. Oh, hang on. Sorry about the delay there. That's a presenter malfunction, not a technical malfunction. There we go, Nneka. Okay. My apologies for that.
That's all right, Emma. Thank you. And hello, everybody. Hi, my name is Dr. Nneka Abulokwe, and I'd like to start by thanking the panel, so Emma, Alison, and also Rebecca for putting in all this effort into bringing us this webinar today. And my journey, my DBA journey, isn't too dissimilar at all from what you've just heard from Michael. And it was quite an interesting journey because I worked in corporate life at the time, and I still do. Okay, and my research started from pretty much a business problem I had, and looking for answers. Okay, yeah, okay. Thank you very much, Emma, for that. Yeah, looking for answers and just reading the literature out there, and also engaging with Cranfield, because I had a long-standing relationship. I had done quite a few courses here at Cranfield, so the natural inclination was to come back to the applied learning source, which Cranfield is known for. And during the course of that discourse, or that interchange or the exchange at Cranfield, the doctoral program was recommended to me. And broadly at the time, my area was all around project delivery, so offshore deliveries, and struggling with some of the practicalities of actually achieving success in deliveries. And I had a very broad-based research topic, which at the time I thought was very clearly defined, and I had a kind of a flight path through my doctoral program. And at that time, it was all around the lack of successful engagement models in IT offshore projects. And in hindsight, I look back now and I think, what does that mean, actually? Because as part of my DBA journey, I actually unpacked almost every single word, even as an example. How do you define success? That sort of thing, and, challenging the thinking. And at the time, I was younger, of course, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, and very enthusiastic, and thinking, okay, fine, this is a time-bound, structured program. I will complete in 4 years. And, yes, I will have the bandwidth to put in at least. And, and then I was very clear about the literature domain that I was looking to contribute or provide contribution or advanced knowledge in that area, and that was all in project management. And yes, I was very, very clear about that, and clear about the literature, the different domains. And of course, I mean, the DBA, as Michael has said before, is the pathway to, of course, establishing credibility, establishing yourself as an expert in that area. And of course, with that comes the pound sign. So yes, and those were the early motivators. So of course, having the doctors by my name. And then also in the picture you see there, that is actually my graduation cake. And my graduation cake is me sitting, as somebody said, atop 3 books. And those 3 books actually were my literature domain. So a very swift departure from project management. I actually explore the strategy, literature domain, outsourcing, and on top there, although that isn't clear, it's actually governance. So it was quite my research journey took me through, I meandered through so many different paths and so many surprises of serendipity in all the research as well that was unknown to me at the time I started. So moving on, in terms of during my DBA, the reality set in. The DBA was a 4-year program, or it was supposed to be a 4-year program. Mine took about 4.5 years. And as I said before, I was doing working in corporate life in delivery, doing a very, very busy job in as senior delivery personnel. And I didn't really anticipate how the DBA would change me in many more ways than I actually anticipated. And just changing even your thought process, but also how you engage with the world, and how you actually learn to compartmentalize your time, and then you become you become quite good at time management. And also, one thing that I did initially struggle with through the first 2-3 years was comfortable about not knowing, and then when you get to a point during your DBA journey where you realize that it is actually comfortable not to know, and then you will eventually get the answers, especially when you have a lot of data and you actually immerse yourself in the data. So I'll go through my DBA journey in terms of the years, and I'll explain why I put the different points down on the slide here. But the first year was all around research methodologies, and given that I had done masters in the past, I've done some research and everything, you think you're a master of research, but actually it takes you back to basics, back to ground zero. And then you start to grapple with all the conflicts, or you start to dance between a corporate life where everything is bullet pointed and brevity is of the essence, and then you're moving to a much more, dare I say, more verbose environment in which you have to detail your understanding and everything. There has to be a thread of logic running through your anything you explain, or your research, and bearing that in mind and anchoring yourself in that. So the first year was quite a path of discovery for me, when I then had to, my natural leaning is more towards qualitative type subjective, the subjectivity of knowledge, and understanding the research path and the discipline and the rigor involved, and especially with Cranfield. I had quite a few knockbacks, but you learn to pick yourself up, dust yourself down, and continue. Because the network I found here, the faculty network, as well as the cohort and even the administrative support you get, is very, very good. But you have to learn to recognize that and use that to your advantage. So also, even I talked about the theory building being not a linear process. It certainly isn't. Although it is documented, you pick up an article, you start to read it, and you think, well, this logic flows. But when you actually get into or take off the lid, you then begin to find that, there are times where you're going down the path where you don't know what rabbit hole you disappeared down, and you come back up, and you have all this expansive data, and then the sense-making begins, and then the reward, and it becomes quite a gratifying process. So it's by no means linear, but it is hard, but when you then become an experienced researcher, you find it very, very rewarding, because you can actually see the theory you're building, you're contributing, develop in front of your eyes. And also, you also learn not to take things at face value. You challenge the status quo. You're always challenging that inquiring mind. And all of that can be very, 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 very satisfying. Also, another thing about the doctoral process, I quickly got to understand that there are three forms of contribution. You can confirm something that is already there. You confirm it within your own research area or your research domain. You add or you refute, and just understanding what a contribution is, or a contribution to knowledge, or how you can advance knowledge. Also, another thing that I touched on before was also the academic writing. That was quite a challenge, but one of the reasons I did come to do a DBA, or I did a doctorate, was actually to push myself and challenge myself in terms of my writing skills, because that in itself does hone your skills, and you find that going back out now, as I've gone back into corporate life, and there's a marked difference in terms of how you present your arguments, in terms of how you document your arguments, and also, dare I say, what you expect from your audience as well. So you're quite clear about that. And in terms of understanding when to take time out as well. You see, the DBA program was for me was made up of 3 thematically led projects, and then a linking document at the end. And the linking document I thought was really a summary of the 3 documents, but no, actually, it was actually a synthesis of the 3 projects as a collective body of work. And that is quite interesting, because it takes you to a completely different level of analysis. And this was the dance I talked about before, being able to do the lower level analysis and then taking it to a higher level, and then the DBA contribution. Now, that in itself was quite a steep learning curve for me, and one of the biggest challenges I did experience in my DBA. But out of that, at the linking document stage, which was in the 4th year, the aha moment. It was like, oh, wow, this is what it's all about. And I came in to do the DBA program having a clear understanding I was going to contribute to project management, and I exited the program contributing to a completely different literature domain, becoming an expert in a completely different area, but having walked a path where I had actually sampled several literature domains to get to my final contribution, which was quite interesting. Now, the final point in this slide is about not being a time-bound process, and I learned this the hard way. And my supervisory panel, on several occasions, I thought, okay, I have a project plan, I'm a project manager, by heart or by discipline. And yes, I know what I'm going to be doing the 1st year, 2nd year, 3rd year, 4th year. Life doesn't operate like that, and I learned the hard way. And having been knocked back several times and saying, well, Nneka, you need to take time off, you are too close, you are too immersed in your data. You really do need to in order to get that level of abstraction, you need some distance from your data. And that was quite interesting and a hard learning curve for me, because it got to a point in my research journey where doing a full-time job and the research, you find that towards the 2nd or 3rd year, you begin to become a master of your area, and the power balance between your supervisory panel and yourself slightly tips in your favor, where your supervisory panel are only just giving you guidance, and you are now the expert in that domain area. Now, when it got to that point, I found out that work was interfering. Now, work started interfering in my DBA or with my DBA, and then I had to make a very, one of the hardest decisions and the biggest risk I've ever taken in my life, to actually quit work and then focus on my DBA full-time. So take a year out, focus on my DBA, and get myself over that hurdle in order to complete within the 4-year period. That was quite an interesting one, but nonetheless, it gave me the space, it gave me the professional and the research distance from my work to actually step back and then crystallize my thinking and then progress my DBA. So, and I'll just run through this very quickly. As I said before, the DBA was made up of 3 research projects, one of which was a literature review, in which I explored the strategy, information technology, and also international business literature domains. The second was actually an empirical piece, so going out there and engaging with the audience out there, my research bed, and actually collecting the data and putting together this second project underpinned by research rigor. And the third was also another empirical piece, but this was a slightly different. The focus was a single case study, but also applying grounded theory, but a slightly different method of grounded theory for my second project. And that in itself, I found demanded from me a different level of thinking and also a different level of engagement with my work, which is invaluable learning experience for me. So, having said that, I move on to the after. And the after, I have a picture there of me being robed for my graduation, and this was one of the proudest moments of my life. I did my viva on the 9th of July 2013, so almost a year ago to date. And I remember an aunt of mine who incidentally is a doctor, a PhD doctor in the States, saying, this is a terminal exam. This is the exam of your life, and this is the highest point you'll ever reach. And she says, tell you one thing, the viva is stressful. It has its stresses and strains, especially in the run-up to the viva. But she says, you know one thing, enjoy it, because this is about the only time anybody will take a keen interest in your work and grill you on your work. So she says, you know what, enjoy that time, and I'm so glad for those pearls of wisdom, because the viva, I went into my viva obviously a little nervous, but actually underpinned by a lot of confidence, because I had actually been, well, I don't want to say knocked back, I use that term loosely. I had actually been held back by my supervisory panel until, they left no stone unturned. It was frustrating for me at the time because I wanted to finish. I just wanted to get this. I said, the term I used at the time was, I just wanted to get this baby out of the way. And they said, well, no, it's not about that actually. It's about, if you lose the essence of doing a doctorate. The doctorate is about, it is the highest level of learning, but for the DBA, it's not just about the learning and the theory. It's actually about the practical application. And the one thing that I actually struggled with, given that I was also a practitioner, and I bill myself first as a practitioner and then second as an academic, but I could not articulate the practice relevance. And the DBA is all about applied learning. So what was that practice relevance? I spent all this money, and what was that product I was taking away? And my supervisory chair, and my supervisor, Professor Claire Kelleher, and my supervisor, Jonathan Lupson, said, you know something, when you can articulate that as a 30-minute elevator pitch, then you're ready to go for your viva. And that aha moment did happen. And at that point, I was able to actually update my CV, because I had a clear understanding of what product it is I was taking back to the market. Because, as I said before, I was first a practitioner. I was then able to then write the practice relevance of my doctorate, so how I was going to operationalize. As Michael said before, the doctorate can be seen to be very theoretical. But how was I going to operationalize and practicalize this theory? And also, I had a clearer understanding of what it is I was going to do out there in terms of now, was I going to go into a job, or was I going to go into consulting? What does this set me up to do? And as I say here, it was the DBA is excellent for practical application, because it gives you new ways of looking at the world. You have a completely different worldview to when I started. the one thing I would say about Cranfield was that we had these in-camera sessions, and now I go back and I watch those videos, and it's almost a timeline of my life, you know. So in the first, and it was probably done twice a year, so I have probably about 8 different video clips. And it's amazing how you can chart that progress in terms of your development, in terms of where you see yourself, how you see yourself. There were points where I could see I was very low, and I said, oh yes, that was my second year. Oh, and there were times when I felt, a lot more confident. But that was, this whole thing, this in-camera session, as it was called, charted my entire DBA journey. And it's now put me at a stage whereby I've gone back into corporate life, but I've gone back as a seasoned, informed professional. I have gone and able to actually make those choices, those career choices that can put you at the top table of an organization in which I have actually achieved, and not just going back to the top table, but being able to actually operationalize my research philosophies, which I'm very, very, I'm very passionate about, but also drive those changes positively through the organization, and also being comfortable with not knowing, you know. So, in essence, the last 4.5 years have been life-changing for me. I mean, the picture here says it all in terms of my crowning glory, really. That is almost like the feather in my cap. But also it's it's actually humbled in many, many more ways, because there's so much we do not know. And that learning is a journey. It is a journey in itself. And, I mean, I know less today than I know tomorrow, you know. And, you know, and it's that path, you know, and I know more today than I did know yesterday. But it just gives me that hope for the future as a professional and also as an academic, because I do intend to take my research endeavors forward, you know, to do more, to provide more, and also as a practitioner to also help to advance and sharpen the practice world out there, you know, and continue to challenge the status quo. And on that note, I would like to hand back to Emma or to Rebecca. I'm not, yes, it's back to Emma. So, yes, I stand corrected here. Okay, and yes, I hand this back to Emma, and I hope I don't have any technology hiccups here.
Okay, thank you very much, Nneka. So we've heard 2 quite insightful and very personal stories, I think, about DBA journeys. What I would like to just spend a few minutes doing now is just to give a very brief overview, if you like, or some brief comments on the DBA program itself, and then we'll open it back up to Michael and Nneka, and obviously myself for questions. So one of the things that you, I guess, will have gathered from our 2 speakers today is that the DBA, as compared to a PhD, is all about impact. So it's not about doing a piece of research that's only going to be read by other scholars. It's really about doing a piece of work that's very relevant to practice and wider policy, and something that's really going to have an impact moving forward on practice and hopefully change practice in the future. And I think you can hear from what our speakers have said today that they came to us with very practical problems or practical issues, and then did some research that hopefully helped them to address that and take some useful knowledge and relevant knowledge forward. So that's probably the main difference between the PhD and the DBA. Another thing I think that's come through very clearly with our 2 speakers, so they've saved me a job probably, is that not only does the DBA have an impact on broader practice or policy, but it also has a very personal impact on the individuals that undertake it. And we see with all of the researchers that go through our DBA program here at Cranfield a real personal transition from someone that's already got a lot of experience and expertise in their practical field, but to someone that really takes a more evidence-based approach, if you like, towards practice or management. Someone that, I think Nneka used the word informed, you know, someone that really takes a more informed and more rigorous approach to decision-making or to practice. And we hear again and again from about a year into the program, in fact, that people talk about how their approach and the way that they make decisions and approach their own practice has changed. What that also means, because of this and the knowledge that they have, is that we do find that that this has a great impact on people's careers. And not everyone comes in wanting the programme to have an impact on their career, but a lot do. Nneka talked about the pound signs there. I think we see evidence again and again that this can have an effect on the pound signs. But not only that, we know that it does help to give people a leg up to the next stage of their career, whether that's up to the next rung of the organisation that they're in, whether that's moving out into consultancy or into more of a portfolio career where they might have more of an academic role. But we do see that it does help people to move forward with their career. I was talking to someone yesterday that graduated with Nneka back in 3 or 4 weeks ago, and already since he completed his DBA, he's had quite a hefty promotion and has taken on quite a lot more responsibility in his organisation. And we hear these stories frequently, so that's nice to know. Okay, so one of our jobs at Cranfield is really mainly is to help the researchers that come on the programme to get to the end successfully, and ultimately that's our goal as well as your goal if you join us on the programme. And we do this in a number of ways. So firstly, rather than asking our researchers to do a single piece of work and go through the process of writing it up in one swoop, if you like, because we know that people that do DBAs tend to be busy and struggle perhaps to find the time to devote to their studies, we've split up the thesis, if you like, so the DBA project into 7 clear milestones or building blocks, and we find that this structure helps people to get through the programme. It makes it easier for them to achieve these milestones as they go along. On top of that, we also offer a particularly high level of support, we think, compared to other programmes and perhaps compared to DBA to PhD programmes. So as well as a lead supervisor, all of our DBA researchers have a panel, so they have access to 2 other members of faculty, which allows us to cover, you know, a multitude of disciplines if that's necessary, or to cover off some different methodological approaches, but also offers more support. In addition to that, we also put a lot of emphasis on peer support. So those of us that join the programme, we only take around 12 to 15 researchers per year, and each cohort that enters will have a cohort leader, so that's a member of faculty that will stay with them throughout the 4 years of their programme. And we put a lot of emphasis on really building a cohesive cohort and encouraging the members of that group to keep in touch and to support each other. And we find that that kind of idea of sharing the pain, if you like, and supporting each other really makes a big difference in helping people get through the programme. The other thing we're very proud of, so I do like to sing about it when we do these webinars, is that we have association of MBA accreditation for 5 years. Now, some of you out there will have seen some of the rankings that are out there on the internet. There are no official rankings for DBA programs that are based on sound data. There is, however, one accreditation system, which is that from AMBER, which is quite a rigorous process, and there are only currently 11 institutions that have AMBER accreditation worldwide, and we're one of those. So we're very proud of that and like to shout about that to the rooftops, as I'm sure you can tell. And finally, very quickly, just to tell you, this diagram looks quite confusing, but it just tells you a little bit about what the programme looks like. So you can see there, I think, the 7 building blocks. So the blue rectangles, if you like, are the 7 building blocks or 7 deliverables of the programme, and they actually they are submitted throughout the programme, as you can see, across the 4 years, but they do form effectively the final thesis. So you're effectively writing your thesis as you go along. Producing those is supported by 8 weeks, 8 taught weeks in the first 2 years. And that's when you will get all of the skills, expertise, research methods, knowledge and information that you need to actually undertake your research. And then we have and then in the later years we have a number of workshops where you can come in if you want to and focus on particular methodologies or particular approaches that are aligned with your research project. We also, I think it's important to say this, because you're doing a piece of research that's relevant to practice, we also encourage you to engage with practitioners or policymakers throughout the programme. That's that yellow arrow there. And we'll ask you to do that and to keep a record of that throughout the 4 years of the programme, so that at the end of the programme, when you get to that final delivery, you can really consider the impact that your research is going to have and actually write that up as part of your thesis. And we feel that that helps you to conduct a piece of work that stays relevant to practice and really does address the practical issue that you arrived with when you joined the programme. Okay, so that's my overview. So we'll open up to questions now. If anyone has any questions, and I know I have a couple for my two colleagues here, but if anyone has any questions, can you please either click on your hand sign to ask the question, or can you type it in the box at the bottom, please, and so that we can see it. Okay. While we're waiting, I will ask a question of my own to Michael, because it's been a little while, Michael, since you completed your DBA. I guess one of my questions would be how you've used the DBA moving forward and what impact you think it's had on your career or your work practice.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for asking me the first question. That's really thoughtful of you. The DBA experience is like knowledge and fine wine. It matures with age. That's what I keep telling myself. I have directly taken away and plagiarized my own thesis. So, for example, I'm going to go live now, am I? For example,
putting the camera on you.
Thanks very much. I'm sure the audience will appreciate that. So, for example, during my research process, I developed let me get the words right now, a non-interruptive I can't think of the words now, it's too late in the afternoon. But anyway, whole risk identification management methodology and process. And as soon as I was out of here, I took that and presented at a number of conferences, and now it's one of the services that my business offers. And I charge 5 figures for it, so that's one way that I use it.
So the pound signs are working for you.
Pounds, dollars, the odd euro even. So that's absolutely fine. Yes, thank you for asking. I guess the next thing is I always joke it probably made me unemployable because I think I outgrew my organization, which is one of the world's largest investment banks. Only because where I was suddenly felt very, very limiting. So I moved to another large investment bank. But ultimately, I set up my own business. I'm now, I guess I could call myself a serial entrepreneur. I'm onto my second business, and an awful lot of what we do is idea, knowledge-based, and it all goes back to decision-making. So, for example, one of the things we do is we build management systems for companies. So, if you've got, for example, a portfolio management issue, we will develop the management system. Now, my very first starting point for that is to go to the manager and say, what decisions do you make? Because that's all you do. You make decisions and you action them. So what are your decisions? And then I work out how can I help them make those decisions? What information do they need? When do they need it? In what format? How do I distribute it? It goes on and on and on. So actually, the structural and methodological approach is there. I've got to throw the word ontology in. So obviously I have an ontological understanding of where I might be weak in certain areas. But seriously, it gets used. I won't say it gets used every day consciously, but it gets used the whole time because I now work in that knowledge business. So it's very, very much a real part of my life.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Michael.
You're welcome.
Nneka, perhaps you haven't had quite as long since you've graduated, obviously, but a little while since you finished then. Perhaps I could ask you the same question about how you've used it, or perhaps how you're planning to use the DBA moving forward.
Okay. Do I have? Okay. Yeah. Okay. So it's how I'm planning to use the DBA. That's quite an interesting question because I actually started using the DBA from when I started the DBA program. So it's not necessarily on completion because it changed me in more ways than I anticipated. And this was even within the workplace. So you very slowly begin to outgrow your role, and the analytical thinking. I mean, it does heighten those types of the critical and analytical thinking, and your mind shifts as you meander, as you meander through the the research path and that path of discovery and that path of, should I say, path of enlightenment, yep, so to speak, it takes you places. Now it's put me at the pinnacle of my career. So upon finishing, so I finished that last year and I started a new job last year, and it's given me the confidence to challenge the status quo. And really, in corporate life, I mean, Michael was talking about decision making here. It's all really, I mean, when you get to that level, it's all around decision making, and it's less about objective fact and subjective perception. And this is one thing I'm beginning to understand very much so. And so it's helping me challenge the status quo. It's making me more aware of the contribution I can make within my organization, and not just within the bounds of my organization, taking that out large, engaging very much with the practice audience out there. And also having that doctor, that title, does lend you credibility. So you can go out there and speak from, I use that word again, an informed position to help to shape the way practice is going out there, which is one thing I'm very keen. I mean, what happens down the horizon is left to me, because it actually has opened up several paths. I mean, at this point in time, yes, I'm working full-time for an organization, but also, I mean, I do some sessions with yourself here in Cranfield. So it has opened up that avenue as well for teaching, but also it's also opened the avenue for me, because once you start researching, you become almost a researcher for life. So there's so many more things that I want to take beyond. And also, I mean, I have not ruled out the prospect of consultancy, which is also, I mean, part of why I developed a novel typology of governance. And I'm looking to take that forward as well. And similar to what Michael has said, also, I hope that those pound signs, the pound signs are following. Yeah, I mean, I hasten to add, but I hope to take that forward as well. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Before you pass control back to me, perhaps I'm aware that it's now 4 o'clock, but I just wanted to ask you both the same question, so perhaps you first, Nneka.
Yeah.
If you were talking to people that were considering doing the program now, what is the one thing that you would say to them, either as a tip or advice, or don't do it?
Well, exactly. Not don't do it. No. Because that I found exceeded expectation. But the one thing I would actually say, a parallel of wisdom, I kind of got to understand that probably my third year of my DBA was actually listen to your panel. I mean, your panel are invaluable. I mean, the resources around, especially in Cranfield, are, because they did give me the good guidance, and when it came to Viva, my Viva was all sailing. It just, I mean, it did help. So that's one thing. That's the one thing I would actually say. Well, almost as a parting shot, really. But yeah, so the panel, the resources you have within the university, yeah. But certainly a resounding yes, do the DBA.
Okay, thank you. I'm relieved that you said that.
Yeah.
Perhaps before Michael asked that question, I believe we have one question from Alvaro. Did you want to unmute your mic, Alvaro, and ask the question? Or type it, if that's easier. That's up to you. Yeah, I've just unmuted.
Let me see if I unmute. Yeah, I think it's on mute now.
Yeah, yeah.
Can you all hear me?
Yep.
Can you all hear me well?
We can, thank you.
Oh, okay. Well, I just want to say thank you for the presentations. I'm glad I joined in today from Brazil. Something that is a question that is on the top of my mind is that for the last years, I've been working with organizations that sometimes to deal with the real problems, that to ask yourself, what is actually behind the real management problems you have, and actually try to solve them in a proper way, more than actually being involved with operational decisions. So although you are called sometimes an executive director or a CIO as myself, something that bothers me a lot in the last years is that you're mainly involved on a daily basis in the organizations I have worked for in a very operational role. So I just wanted to know from our panelists today if they had the same feeling before, and when they went to their bosses and told them that, well, now I decided to go and take a DBA, if their manager also asks them about, oh, really? Why do you want to do that? Why do you consider this important? It looks for me that some organizations, or most of them, are not really ready to deal with people that want to move on with their careers and progress to a new degree. Did you have the same feeling?
Who wants to answer that?
Right. I can actually answer both your question and yours, Emma, because it really comes down to the same thing.
Okay, good.
I'll put a bit of context first, and the context, as you've already said, is the School of Management, the university, wants you to succeed. So there's incredible support, which is just as well, because it is a difficult and lonely process. I think for me, you've actually hit on the key point. At all times, you need to be very clear in your head, why am I doing this? Because that will then tell you what you need to do. And that's really important at the start, because you will be questioned, you'll be challenged, right? So, I was a father of 2 kids, had a lovely, healthy mortgage, still have. And, my wife is there going, why are you doing this? Your career is going really well, why are you doing this? My boss asked me, why don't you do this, and so on. So the first thing is you've got to go along and get all those people around you to buy in. And if you're not clear why you want to do it, there's no chance that they can possibly support you, because they won't understand even what you're at. The other reason it's really important, and your reason for doing it may change over time, but the other reason it's really important is there are lots of lonely, dark nights. And in those lonely, dark nights, you need to say to yourself, I'm doing this because I want to do this, or I want to show whatever. And that's a really important thing. And I think that's hopefully that answers your question. I think it answers your question too, Emma. That's my advice to everyone.
Absolutely, yeah.
Always be clear why you're doing it.
Nneka, do you want to answer Alvaro's question?
Yes, I'm just waiting for him. Okay, yes. Thanks, Alvaro. Yes, and that was a question that was asked to me quite a few times by my employer at the time, and then also by myself, because I questioned. I didn't question my hunger for knowledge or the quest to advance knowledge, but I actually questioned the reason in terms of the subject area I was looking at. And at the time, when I look back now, I thought I did know why, but my reasons changed over time. And this is part of what I said about comfortable not knowing, but also the DBA process, and by its nature and by the nature of, or the structure of research, you start off with a research problem. You can't do any, you have to have a problem, a basis first upon which to work and then unpack and unpick the problem and then find a particular solution. And that whole process as well helped clarify my thinking. Of course, I was quite a few £1,000 lighter at the end of it, but it was well worth it. And another thing, because of the, I actually had to write a business case for my employer, but when I then came to Cranfield and then explored and sort of scratched beneath the surface a bit more, I realized that I needed that freedom of thought. So it was no more about the funding. It was now my own pet project, and I wanted to sponsor that myself. And I couldn't have anybody dictating the flow of my research my research process. As Michael has said, there were dead lonely nights. And it's a very lonely journey to walk, because you're creating this world in which you're walking. But the answers do come. So my parting shot here is, yes, have a very clear understanding, or have some clear understanding, but it's more the will that takes you through the process. You see, because that, the reasons may change as you move along that journey, but it's just the will to complete and to succeed as well as paramount for me. Yeah.
Okay, perhaps I could ask you both for one more piece of advice before we go. Michelle, who's one of our attendees today, has said that, relatively speaking, his biggest challenge is coming up with a topic or a subject for him to research. So perhaps I could ask you if you have any advice for him.
Sorry. Yep. Okay. So who asked that question? Michelle. Okay. Hi, Michelle. Hiya. Michelle, the research topic. On my slides, I started off with a research topic that I think described. It was about the lack of successful engagement models, and as far as largely, I kind of had a loosely defined research area and topic, that was fine, because in the first year, I remember the first session we had, the first cohort week, they said, well, just liken it to a funnel, and then you start off with all these questions and all these things swirling around, and then you begin to eventually crystallize yes. You see, and then everything. So don't, I mean, the underpinning thing again for me is the will to succeed, you know, and the passion to take it forward, and be comfortable with not defining it too well, because my topic was the lack of successful engagement models and offshore projects. And then when I finished, the actual topic was about it was called from imposed to co-develop governance processes in IT outsourcing. Completely different, but there was a pathway through, and there was a thread from the logic I eventually started off with and what I finished off with. So it's fine. I mean, and your panel, as I say, are here to support you, and they will help you to start to fine-tune that thinking, and it's all part of that journey. So I can almost guarantee that 90% of the people that started the DBA, and please challenge me, Emma, started with a particular research topic or loosely defined topic and have come through with something slightly different to what they started off with. And that's it. Michael?
Thanks very, very much. I think you're completely wrong. I think everybody changes their topic as they go through the DBA.
Everyone, fine, yeah.
I'll give you my cynical street advice, and I'll give you something a bit more formal that'll be more acceptable to Emma. I mean, basically, it almost doesn't matter where you start, because the process in the first year is all about refinement, and there's so much challenging and constant refinement. That said, it's good to start someplace. And if you genuinely don't know where to start, I would start off with saying, what is my passion? What is my passion? And then come up with a statement about your passion and put a question mark at the end of it. And that can be your opening gambit. So it might be project management, there aren't enough women. It can be, we need more yellow lines on the road. It can be whatever you want it to be. Just find a statement and make that into a question. Because at the very least, then you're contributing to the existing knowledge and reinforcing what we already know. But I can guarantee you will end up, no matter how hard you try, in fact, you might not try too hard, you will end up going through the process will bring you to a really precise point. And I'm sure it will not be where you expect it to be. My DBA was going to be completely analytical, numerical, financial. And clearly, as it went along, I became amazed at how much better my panel were understanding it as I changed the topic. It turned out it was me, not them. But I mean, the point is, it's just you just need to find yourself a place to start and not to worry. You're going to work so hard over the 4 years. Don't put too much effort into it now. Would be my suggestion. If you're at the end of year one, come and talk to me offline. I'll help you. I'll help you get to that point. I'm assuming that Michelle is not in the process yet, but.
Okay, on that note, I need to apologise to Michelle, whose first name is actually Barrett, so I do apologise for that. I got your surname and your first name the wrong way round, so my apologies for that. That's what happens when you're trying to read things quickly and speak. Who says women can multitask, eh? I'm not sure that's really true. Okay, thank you for that. I think I would like to actually, on that point, just back up what Michael said, because it is really the most important thing with any doctorate, whether it's a PhD or a DBA, is passion. You know, you will have those long dark nights that Michael mentioned before. It is 4 years that you need to keep going on this topic, so you do need to find something that you're interested in enough, passionate enough about, that can keep you going. So, you know, so why other things might be important, so having a topic that's important to your company so that you can align your day job and your DBA may also be a consideration. Having something that will have a real impact on practice may be a consideration, but I think the key thing to think about is what will keep you going and what is interesting enough to you to keep going for, you know, through the 4 years. So, you know, so as Michael said, perhaps start with what interests you. You know, is there a problem that keeps you awake at night? Is there something that really frustrates you in the workplace that you feel passionately about? Is there something that's always bothered you that you'd like to do research about? You know, start with that. Start with those things, and then, you know, and then the first year of the program is really about doing that funneling thing that Nneka spoke about to really help you define your actual focus for your research, and you'll get lots of support for doing that. Okay, if we have no other questions, I'm aware that we've run a little over time. So if we've got no other questions, I'm looking at my group. Okay, then it's just with me to say thank you very much to Michael and Nneka and to Rebecca for taking over the technical side. Thank you to you also for attending. If you do need any further information, then please do get in touch with us. So the web address is on the screen now. Also, we are in the 21st century, so we do play around on Twitter occasionally. So there's the hashtag CranfieldDBA. Do follow us. Or if you want to attend one of our open days, then our next one is now not until November. But obviously, if you want information in the meantime, do get in touch with myself or one of the team. Okay? Thank you very much.